Hello, hello. Hey, Bo.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How about you?
Doing well, thanks. A little bit cold, but otherwise all right.
Yeah, that's great. Welcome everyone and welcome our audience here in a new episode with Hadith Tech. We are having Bo from the UNICEF to talk about his experience in open source and the whole work they are doing there. Um, so welcome, Bo, again.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me too. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you very much, and thank you for accepting this invite. It's really awesome. Uh, I would like to get a little bit about you and the work you are doing right now. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, my name's Bo Percival. I am currently a senior advisor for innovation at UNICEF. I focus on the ventures team, which I'm sure we'll dig into a little bit more. I'm Australian, living in Geneva and working in Stockholm, so kind of like a bit all over the place when it comes to how and where I work. And yeah, this is kind of what I'm doing now, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of elaborate a little bit on that as we go through our discussion today.
We will be happy to know about that. I would like to know about a little bit about like the work you are doing right now in the UNICEF, let's say, and what kind of innovation and stuff that you are focusing in.
Yeah, so the work that I do now is for an office within UNICEF. I guess I shouldn't have to describe what UNICEF does, but most people should know UNICEF as a
Yeah.
UN agency specifically focused on children, the UN Children's Fund. And within UNICEF, there is an office called the Office of Innovation, and this team is particularly tasked with trying to discover, explore, and scale up innovative solutions for children and to accelerate us towards the child-related SDGs. The team that I specifically work for, we actually have a venture fund in UNICEF that's been running since 2014. And I have the pleasure of supporting that team as the lead of the team to really be at the cutting edge of innovation. So discovering new technologies, we invest in technologies through that fund. We also explore some emerging tech around blockchain, drones, AI, etc. And hopefully the thesis of what we try and do here is discover new technologies and new ideas that are going to be transformational for the future for children.
Yeah, that's really awesome to know about this work. I would like to get to know about it more like and more deeply, but I would like to ask you about how did you get like into UNICEF and the whole work of innovation? I think you have like a background from another department or something like that. It's non-tech, so we could like start from there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it's kind of always been a part of what I've done. I remember, and I'm afraid to show my age here, but when I started, when I finished my last year of school, I did 2 years of what they called like IT at the time. What
Wow.
that was basically some very basic programming in BASIC. And that kind of got me hooked on the idea of technology and being able to create things through code and create software. But to be very honest, I had a really hard time with that with that course and really struggled. And I don't like to give up on challenges. So after finishing school, I didn't pursue a career in technology immediately, but just always on the side kept tinkering away. And I think you and other of your audiences probably feel the same, but I never like to be beaten by technology. So I felt like it
Yeah.
was that's how I learned to kind of keep just trying to solve problems. But interestingly, well, at the time, development and humanitarian response didn't have much to do with technology. And so I had these kind of two parallel careers. Like one was working as a hobbyist in building tech and software and websites and that kind of stuff. And then the other was I was a youth worker for a while and worked in development and community social work and nonprofits, etc. So for the longest time, these two things were very different. But as everybody knows, over the last like 15 or so years, 10 or 15 years, digital just became such a big player. And so for me, it was really fortunate that now my two worlds kind of came together and I could do work with NGOs and nonprofits because they needed people who knew technology. And I kind of worked in that space for quite a while. And how I got into UNICEF, I've worked for a lot of NGOs at international level. I've worked in Nepal, China, Thailand, and worked for an organization called Plan International, which is another child-focused organization. Did some work there on developing their innovation work for education. Then did some work in an open source project, which we can dive into a little bit deeper, known as OpenStreetMap, and worked for an organization called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. And then found my way into UNICEF. And this kind of, as many people would know, UNICEF and UN is like a big system. And I was a little bit nervous about moving from kind of, the tech space into a big system. But in the innovation office, there's a lot of people like me who care about innovation, who care about children, and care about like open source technologies. And so, yeah, I kind of found my home here in the last couple of months.
That's really awesome. Like, it's really interesting to know about like you are having people with the same like mindset with you as well, who are like working for the same goals.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that makes working more enjoyable when everybody at least feels like we're on the same team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Could you like elaborate a little more about the OpenStreetMaps and what kind of work you were doing there?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess many people who would know open source software would know OpenStreetMap, and for those that don't, if you've ever used anything that has a map on it that isn't Google, you've probably used OpenStreetMap. The OpenStreetMap project is essentially an open digital map of the world where anyone can contribute. And the work that I did there is actually for an organization called the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And that organization used to leverage the data in OpenStreetMap to respond to like humanitarian response to disasters, and also for development work. So at the time I was there, one of our goals was to map an area home to 1 billion people, because so many people are not included on Google Maps or other maps of the world. So that was kind of one of our key purposes there. Yeah, very interesting project.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as for that, like, would you like to tell us about your role there and what did you do there as well?
Sure. Yeah, I was the director of technology and innovation there. So I led a team, so similar kind of work to what I'm doing now in terms of team leadership. I led a team of about 15 to 18 people. 16 of those people would have been engineers. And what we were trying to do was a few different projects. There's a very well-known project around OpenStreetMap project, the OpenStreetMap called Tasking Manager. This is basically a place where people can go and map collaboratively. So our team ran that, built and ran that project, that product. We had a couple of other products around data analysis. So the team that I worked for, that I led, were really just, they often were referred to as hacktivists, where they just really cared about like coding around engineering and programming for a purpose. And that's kind of, yeah, what I had the fortune of doing there.
That's really awesome. That's really great. Um, as for that, like, how is the experience for you as a leader who's like doing the work, this work in innovation, and how do you find it like for leading people and to make them motivated to like get to new innovative and get like new solutions for that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I could talk about leadership as a whole other podcast. I think I really love leadership, and in the fact that it's such a privilege to get to support people who are really good at their jobs. I appreciate the opportunity to work with people that know their area of expertise so well and be able to understand how I can enable them to be the best version of themselves. I had engineers on my last team who had been working around open source software for 40 years. So there's obviously nothing I'm going to teach them about engineering or coding. But it's able to find ways that they can, do their work the best way that they can, that I can give them the resources to do that, that I can create an environment for them to be able to excel in that. And I remember a quote that I saw somewhere about like innovation leadership isn't about control or telling people how to create new things. It's about creating the safe space where people can take risks and create the future. And I kind of like that as a quote, that like leading in that innovation space has nothing to do with coming up with new ideas. It's all about creating that space for other people to really, create the future.
That's really awesome. That's really great. As for that, like for creating the space, how do you create it, like, and how you make that?
Yeah, good question. It's not easy, and especially
Yeah.
over the last 2 years. Like the last team that I worked with, it was 2.5 years before I met any of them in person, obviously because of COVID. So I took up that post, and then COVID hit, so I didn't get to meet anybody for 2.5 years. So it was really tricky to kind of create that space and the trust and the connection with people, not being able to meet them in person. Um, I would say that one of the key things to innovation is risk, but it takes a lot of safety, like psychological safety, for people to feel comfortable taking risk. So for me, a big part of it is about making sure that I trust the people that I work with, that they know that I trust them, and that I'll support them even if things go right or things go wrong, and that I'll always be there, in their corner no matter what happens. And if something goes wrong, then we work on that together. If everything goes right, then that we should celebrate those things that go right. But for sure, innovation is a lot about trying new things and taking risks. And when it doesn't work out, it's not a failure, but it's more just a great opportunity to learn. So, if something didn't go as planned, we would sit down, debrief, learn about it, and know that it's not like, well, you did a bad thing because you failed. Actually, it's a great lesson every time we don't get it right. So yeah.
That's really awesome. That's really great to know. And as for this kind of safe place and this safe environment where you help people to like innovate and think more, how did you get like in doing this in UNICEF and like empowering people in like different areas, like as you mentioned, drones or let's say education and the stuff that like are going for children?
Yeah, so I guess as far as the whole team of the Office of Innovation and the Venture Fund is concerned, I'm relatively new to this. So I think it's been an interesting journey, because a lot of the culture, a lot of the performance, and a lot of the work had been already undertaken, or like it was on its way by the team that I was supporting. And so coming into that, it's really about finding the balance between not disrupting all the great work that's being done, but also being able to push the people that we work with to achieve like even more than they've already done. So actually, I've been thinking about a lot this recently, and the way that I would see it, and for those that are on like that follow you, like I think of it kind of like refactoring code,
Yeah,
when you have to understand like where all the strengths of your code are and what functions are really core to things happening, but without changing the kind of external value and the external behaviors of the product itself. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it at the moment, is understanding like what really makes the team that I'm with and the space that I'm in successful, and then understanding kind of what distracts them from doing that job efficiently, and then trying to refactor that code so that it's in a nice kind of efficient way, and delivers the value that everybody has kind of learned to appreciate from the team.
that's really awesome. That's really great. And for that, I would like to know a little bit more about the work you are doing, let's say the projects that you are empowering through the venture fund, like, or the work you're having.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of them. I guess one thing I should probably mention with the venture fund, there's critical criteria that we use when we're funding projects. One is that the projects have to be uh, operating and owned in a program country for UNICEF. So a country that UNICEF does its work in, the programs have to come from that, or the products and companies have to come from those countries. The second is that we only invest in open source solutions, or solutions that would become digital public goods.
Yeah,
And then the third is that where possible, we try and find a gender balance in the companies that we're supporting.
that's really great.
So yeah, so we focus on those companies. Some of the companies recently, or some of the projects that we've been working on, across the spectrum, I guess. Like I'm trying to think of if I can pick from one of each, but like we have a company in the Philippines called Thinking Machines, and they focus on artificial intelligence, and a whole range of different products there. A great organization that has just been incredibly successful in understanding like data needs of people, and being able to apply like machine learning and AI techniques to different needs. One example of this might be using, actually they work around OpenStreetMap as well, but using data from OpenStreetMap and other satellite imagery, etc., to do prediction of cones of influence from hurricanes or typhoons, and being able to understand where the biggest impact would happen. In addition to that, another project that we're working on at the moment would be around a blockchain company, and looking at how we can create transfers and smart contracts on the chain that allows people to transfer money during either humanitarian disaster or when people don't have like strong banking mechanisms. So that's something that has also been really, really important to the work that we're doing as well. So they're probably like two of the most recent examples.
Oh, that's really great to know about those. I would like to know like how you are, let's say, as UNICEF, like empowering them. Like, is it just like a fund, or are you like providing them more stuff like ideas, or let's say consultancy and that work? Hmm.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there. Like, can you hear me right now?
Got you now. Yep.
Yeah. I was asking like about the how you are like empowering them. Is it like just like a fund in from the UNICEF, or like are you doing anything else like with consultancy, or let's say helping them with ideas and how to implement their work?
Yeah, good question. So normally we don't just provide funding, we also provide mentorship. So the
Yeah.
companies that come into our fund will receive funding, of course. And typically we tend to focus, well, traditionally we focused on early stage startups. So they may already have the idea, they may kind of know the area that they want to work in. And what we will be doing is helping to like move that idea forward. So we have like our early stage or our pilot kind of stage where we work with these companies. They receive some mentorship from us in different areas depending on the company itself. But this might be mentorship around business modeling. It could be mentorship around open source software and how to create, business models or software and work with licensing, etc. And there's a couple of other areas as well about how we can really not just invest financially in the business, but invest capacity in the business as well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And for that, like, why did you choose like to go for open source as a UNICEF, like, and choose like companies that are working on open source projects?
It's a good question, and it's one that I get asked quite often. There's probably a few reasons. There's probably the professional reason here, and then also my personal belief about it. I'll give you a bit of both.
Yeah.
On one, the open source is really about accessibility. It's the ability for people to create products that other people can use, and that we can really have like a multiplier effect. So if a company creates an open source product that works really effectively in one particular country, the ability to take that product and expand it without having constraints on like contracts, on resources, etc., is a great way to kind of leverage the impact developed in software, and also to make it accessible for people who are users as well. That often there's like lower points of entry, lower financial costs involved with open source software as well. I think that comes with a catch, which I can talk about in a second, but I think truly I believe in free and open source software because of the communities that are around it and the contributors. And there's a thing, kind of a point here that I really appreciate about open source software, just around the philosophy of it, of that people that come to this space really care about the product succeeding and bring them, like in that case, a level of sustainability to make sure that they really, the product succeeds, not just because it has a whole ton of money or just because it gets, first round funding, but it succeeds because it has value to the people that use it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And for that, like, how do you think about like? Can you hear me? I
Yep,
think
yep.
we, yeah. Yeah, I was asking like about how you see like the improvement of innovation when you're like adding more people on the project and being open source, so and having this kind of inclusive ideas there.
Definitely. And people can come from anywhere on those projects. So you get all of these different perspectives and different ideas, like much more diverse kind of contributors, teams as well, that build that software. So I think that's a real advantage.
No, that's really great. And for that, I would like to know like for the program that you are having right now, can people apply for that or have anything to where can they apply for it?
Yeah, good question. So we do open calls, and those calls tend to be structured around either a problem statement, a specific challenge that we're trying to solve, or sometimes like technology. So we might do like a call for tech, like for companies who work around blockchain. We just put one out last week, actually, aligned with COP, which happened the last 2 weeks, and it's a climate change call. So this call specifically is looking for innovators in the climate change space, people that might be working with technologies that can really advance us towards like a better future for children when it comes to climate. And the UNICEF Innovations website is going to be the best place to get that. All of our stuff is posted there. I'm sure we can share a link or something afterwards, but yeah, that's the latest call that we have open at the moment.
Sure, that's awesome. I will share the link later in the description and in the podcast and YouTube as well for people to check that and see, try to apply or even like just check the program that you have. Uh, as for that, I would like to know about like the climate change and what are you looking there for the companies? Like what kind of innovation you are thinking that it might happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wish I had the answer to that, but I also am glad I don't. I think what we're looking for is ideas that we haven't already had ourselves.
Yeah.
Within the Office of Innovation, we do have a portfolio that specifically focuses on climate. And there is a lot of ideas like around innovation where climate plays a role. I think what I'm trying not to do is like imagine what the solution is going to look like or what that company is going to be, because I would love to see the company that comes out of nowhere and surprises us. Oh, this is how we're going to do the next thing for climate. And whether that's, using technologies that exist like blockchain, or whether it's using drones to do mapping of like water tables or water sources or something like this. I don't know, like what I'm excited about is to see the ones that really surprise us and say like when those submissions come in, we'll see things that we weren't expecting.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And for that, like, what are the areas that you are looking for right now? You mentioned like climate change, I think drones and education, blockchains, and do you have another areas that you are focusing on as well in the UNICEF right now?
Yeah, we have a range of portfolios, and I'm going to be tested if I have to think of all of them on the podcast. But I'll try and get to the ones that I can. So we have education, we have health, we have sustainable water and sanitation. We have innovative finance as well. So looking at different ways that we can raise and use funds. There's, I said learning already. Mental health is another one that we'll be also looking at as well. We have about 8 in total. And some of these areas of expertise will be specific portfolios, or they will be like hubs that will be set up within the office as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. For me here, I get 2 questions. I will go for the first one, which is like, how do you choose this kind of areas and go with that? Like, do I define a problem or like a pain point somewhere, or like, um, how do you find that?
Yeah, there's probably 2 parts to it. Like one is UNICEF has very specific programmatic areas of focus that we do focus on. So that helps to create part of that definition. The other part of it as well, from the office perspective, is that we have looked across a number of these different programmatic areas and tried to define like really clear problem statements. So like, what are some of the big problems that we'd like to try and solve? And those problem statements underpin most of our work in terms of like what falls into a portfolio and the kind of problems that we're looking to solve. So that's kind of how those areas come about, how we decide on what we're going to focus on. And then also in addition to that, like emerging needs and emerging technologies or anything that we think we should be focused on. For the team that I work with, the ventures team, we do a lot of like exploration work. So it might not be something that has a solution right away, but something that we are interested in, like quantum computing would be a good example of that. Like right now we know that we can't do much with it, but in the future we know it is going to be an important part of the world. So yeah, it's partly having these definitions to guide us, but also partly exploring new areas as well.
That's really awesome. As for the new areas, I got curious, like, if there is a company somewhere like thinking about area that you haven't mentioned, or like the UNICEF didn't think about that, can they apply, or like can they get in touch with you to introduce this area, or like to do stuff with you at this area?
Yeah, definitely. If there's something that can surprise us or that we haven't seen on the horizon, we're always open to learning more about what that could be. If it aligns with one of those areas that we were just talking about, like I think that's always makes a stronger case. And if it aligns with a call or something that is currently open, that makes it even easier. But I mean, one of the greatest things about working in innovation and tech is getting surprised by ideas that you were not expecting. So if people have those, I'm always happy to listen to them.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And for right now, I would like to know from your perspective about the future of children and intake, or let's say the future of children and the work you are doing in tech right now. How do you see that, and how do you see the work you are doing will impact their life in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's probably some significant future forces that we are really trying to address, or like at least explore, if not solve. The climate change is obviously going to be one of the biggest ones. I think it can't be ignored, and I think that when we talk about anything that we do for the future, particularly for children and young people, it has to be a part of that discussion. That whether or not we have technologies that solve it, whether we have technologies that reduce our like human impact on the planet, that would be definitely one of the key things that we'd be looking at. The other thing I think when it comes to the future, obviously there's a lot of talk at the moment about the metaverse and what that's going to look like. I think that the real consideration for us will be how it will be safe and protected for young people and children to be able to engage in that world without being at risk. I think that there's serious considerations around human rights, around rights of children, etc. If they're going to engage and operate in that space. So that's another space that we'll be really following closely. I would like to say quantum, but I have no idea how that looks yet. So I'm going to say maybe in 5 years, and I'll have a different answer to that question. And then the other thing I think that would be really, really important for us to be looking into is also around the interaction between mental health, well-being, and digital as well. I think if there's ever increasing use of technology and dependency on technology, how do we balance some of the offsets on mental health, on how people engage with technology, and how it affects our well-being and our psychology. So that would be a couple of areas as well.
That's really awesome to know and interesting. From here, I would like to see as a UNICEF, since you are mentioning this kind of areas, how would that have a direct impact for children? Let's say, would this increase their ideas about the world, or would that increase their life standards?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot. I might have missed the first part of that question, so if I don't answer it directly, feel free to throw it at me again. In terms of like the direct impact on children, a good example might be like what we're doing with blockchain at the moment, and like cash transfers, for example. So if we are able to set up systems that are more transparent and more efficient, that enables money to be moved around between individuals, between organizations and individuals, we would see that having a flow-on effect to children by being able to provide them more resources, access to health, access to education. So that would be one example. The other place that we might see this happen too is in like education. So, you know, real progress and innovation around education would hopefully increase accessibility to education. So, for example, if there's open systems, if there's open education that is more inclusive, more accessible, then we would hope more children would have access to education. So that would be kind of two immediate examples. And you know, with drones as another example, distribution of payloads that might include vaccinations, etc. That would be another example of where we would be able to use, you know, technologies to have direct impact on people and children.
That's really awesome. And it's really nice to know about like the impacts from this side on children. For me, like I get curious about the children that may have like, let's say, less life standards, or they don't have. Can you hear me? Mm. Can you hear me? I think we lost the internet somehow. But for the people who are curious and would like to know about the UNICEF fund, they could go with the UNICEFinnovation.org, where they can like find the whole program that they are having and the whole project that they are doing on. So you can see that on the screen, and it will be attached in the information as well, and the description as well. Hey, Bo, again.
Hi, sorry about that. I just got kicked out of the room. Apologies.
That's totally fine. Like I had this time to like to be able to share the link with people and to talk about the UNICEF Innovation website.
Fantastic. Well prepared.
Yeah, thank you for that. Uh, I was asking about the people who are having, like, let's say, the children who are having not having a good life standards, and they are not being able to connect with the internet or not being able to connect with technology. How you see the future of them, and how you see the impact that you are doing in UNICEF for those kind of areas and people. Let's say if we are talking about refugee camps or war zones or areas without electricity.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. There's two answers, like two parts to my answer to that question. In terms of connectivity, there is actually a project that the Office of Innovation we've grown out of the Office of Innovation called the Giga Project. The intention of this project is to connect every school in the world to the internet, and they are like a force when it comes to this. So they are really working quite intentionally and quite actively in doing this, creating partnerships with the ITU, with other countries and organizations all over the world. So connectivity is something that UNICEF is focusing on and really driving forward. In terms of that's always a tricky question. Because
I think we lost the internet again. So here, I would like to talk that all the innovation funds, since they have this website, I would like to really thank them about the work they are doing and the areas and portfolios that they are focusing on. Beside that, it's really awesome to know about the whole projects on the open source. So hey, Abu again.
sorry about that.
That's totally fine. That's really okay. We couldn't hear the second part of your answer.
Okay, sure. Do you want me to go the whole answer again? I can go back to the beginning.
It would be awesome to go from the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So I was take the easiest part of that question first, around connectivity. And one of the initiatives of the Office of Innovation at the moment is a project called the Giga Project. It's basically, the idea of that project is to connect all the schools in the world to internet. And that team has been working really hard and is quite a large team, has a lot of amazing partnerships, and is really moving forward on how to both identify where all the schools are. That's problem number one. And then two, get connectivity to those schools. So there's more information I can share on that project afterwards. It's a really incredible project. The second part of the question around using technology when in conflict or in times when electricity might be limited, I think that's a hard one, because where there's no electricity, the technology can't run anyway. So you kind of like, it's just like pulling the plug out.
Yeah.
I would say that the technology is the second part of that problem. The first part is like solving the electricity problem. So I think that's a good question. However, in saying that, I think a lot, excuse me,
That's
these
fine.
days a lot of the focus is on identifying how we can look at like alternative ways of creating connectivity, or alternative ways of doing digitally enhanced things offline. So like a really good example of this is just like offline learning, where you could take a tablet anywhere and be able to access the education without necessarily having the connectivity. I've seen some really amazing projects out there, actually. There was one, I think it was with Plan International. It was called like School in a Bag, or like something like this. And essentially it was a backpack that people could wear, and it had a solar panel on it that would charge a battery, and then you could set it up and it would have like e-learning modules running on it as well. So there's in the innovation space, there's a lot of creative ideas about how we can go, into those really conflict affected, or not necessarily conflict, but like constrained contexts, and be able to still deliver technology. I mean, there's also a project which is in not necessarily development space, but AWS Snowball, it's called, which some people might have heard of before. But that really is this, like, it's an edge computing solution, but essentially it's built in this like indestructible box. So at any time you can take a hybrid version of your cloud infrastructure out into the field in like an emergency situation, set up like a local cloud, so to speak. And then when you're done with that, take it back home and in sync with your regular infra. So there's lots of really interesting creative ways that people are thinking about how to deal with those very, very challenging contexts.
That's really interesting to hear about this kind of answer. I would like to elaborate a little bit about the electricity question. Like, since you mentioned like that we need to solve the first part of the issue, which is like electricity and connecting people with that. Do you think that the for education and for the children, if we went for the traditional ways of education and focused on their needs, that be more valuable for them, or should the people think about the technology directly and the digital part of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they can't happen independently. There's my immediate question to that is, I'm not going to be the right person that will have the answer to what young people and children need. Like, that's where we
Yeah.
need to start. And coming from a background that's involved a lot of like human-centered design or user-centered design, like that's always where I would begin, is like, what does that user actually need? I was in a while ago in a like human-centered design workshop with a bunch of young people at a previous job, and we were doing all of this stuff, and we had brought people from all over Indonesia to do this workshop. And one of the kids just basically said to me, "Well, I can't eat a tablet. Like, this is no good to me," because the issue they were having wasn't about technology; it was about that they needed money for food. And so I think that there's often this. For people who are around technologists, there's this concept of like solutionism, that everybody's like, you've got the solution, you just need to go and find the right problem for it. And I think that that's something that we need to be quite honest with ourselves about in the technology world, that technology is not going to solve all problems. It has like some problems that it applies really well to. It has some problems that might apply kind of okay to, and some problems where it's just not the right space for it. So I think being honest about when technology is going to have its greatest impact is a really important part of that conversation. And there's this fantastic book, and I can't remember who it's by, but it's called Geek Heresy. And it's basically on this premise that, you know, using technology in development context or in, you know, the space that UNICEF and other INGOs work, it's not about the technology, it's about the people behind the technology or that use the technology, and that's where you always need to start. I think that's like the core of any of this discussion.
That's really interesting, especially the part of like having the human-centered design and starting from the point, from the pain point that they have, then going to the other part for that. Um, I would like to know and hear more about the Giga project that you mentioned at the beginning of the answer.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to talk too much about it because it's not my project and I don't want to
Yeah.
misrepresent the project. But in short, it was a project that kind of came out of the Office of Innovation and has been around for a while. I mean, the principle is actually quite simple. The principle is that they just want to connect all schools to the internet, and I think it's a fantastic, like, really easy kind of premise. You know, I mean, not easy to complete, easy to communicate, easy
Yeah.
to complete, totally different story. But recognizing kind of digital access and digital inclusion as a really core part of like, I don't want to say necessarily human right, but definitely a right, that this is important to making sure that everyone has the same access to the same information. Then yeah, it's a project that I think is critical, and it's a part of kind of another other parts of work as well, that if you connect people to the internet, then you need to have like content that would be there, and you need to be able to have the devices to support that as well. And that's kind of all part of it. But it's really a great project that focus on a very specific part of the problem and a very core part of the problem, because no matter how much great software you develop, if you're not connected to the internet and you can't access it, then it's all for naught. So yeah, kind of the leading edge of much of our other work that comes through as well.
Thank you for that and for telling us about sharing this information about the project and the whole work you are doing. I think we are getting to the end of this episode, and I would like to know about to hear your thoughts and if you want to share anything with the audience.
Yeah, I think, like, if I'm going to just share anything kind of randomly, it will be back to one of the points that we were just talking about before. I think in anything that we do, and like particularly around technology and innovation, it is all about the people that use that technology, and I think that often gets forgotten about. And I've worked on the engineering side before, and you know, when you start with an idea, and particularly if you start with an idea for a solution and you start building that, you get often really caught up in the idea and forget why you're doing it. And I would encourage anyone who's developing or building any project is like, just never forget who you're doing it for. Like, sure, maybe for yourself sometimes, but there's got to be a user, and that user has a problem, and it's about solving that problem in the best way that you can. And I think that that's something that, no matter, you know, the amount of work that I've done, it's something that you just can't forget about. And my world outside of innovation is actually in psychology, and I think that's another kind of key part as well, is like the experience that the user has, how they use the technology, is all just as important as the code that actually runs it. So for me, I would say, for anyone who's like deep technologist, you can't forget about humans, and that's what we're all here for. You know, like technology, even the fact that you and I are chatting, it's the technology that allows us to connect as people. So that's kind of always at the core of my work when it comes to technology and innovation.
That's awesome. That's a really interesting idea here. Like, I would like to say that without people, we wouldn't be able to have technology or even having the impact that we are seeing right now.
That's right. And a piece of technology that has no users is basically just lines of code. So you can't ignore it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. That even reminded me of the thing like the last few weeks when I went in the GitHub Universe conference. There was the talk from the Stormy Peters she was the VP of communities in the GitHub, and she talked about the value of communities for the open source and value of communities for the whole world, and how that's helping them to create great software there as well.
Definitely. I think community is like, I mean, it's something that's close to my heart, and particularly like some of the open source projects, I mean, as anyone who's a part of an open source community will know, they're very diverse communities. You can have like lots of people that you get along with and lots of people that you don't. And I think, but that's what makes it really rich. I think it's that ability to share ideas, to challenge each other, and to bring like your own perspective. You're absolutely right. Like community is such an important part of of kind of the like the depth of a product or a project, I think, as well.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts and idea here. We
Pleasure
really,
anytime. And about the technology issues, but I guess it was only it was only appropriate, wasn't it?
yeah, it was awesome. Like since we could have the voice and we could have the idea, so it's like totally okay for that. Even with everything or all the issues that we have, it's fine. It always happens.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the audience who listened to us today, and those who will listen to us in the future. We will hope to see you in the future in new episodes and talk with you later. Have a great day.